If you have a question for Dr. Donna, please do leave it on my page, and I will be happy to answer the question for you. Everybody, welcome. I'm so happy you kept your appointment. Welcome to another episode of Talking with Dr. Donna. I am your host, Dr. Donna White-Carey, and I am so happy that you decided to keep your appointment. You know, we have our appointments every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. right here on YouTube. If this is your first time, welcome. I hope you enjoy the show. If this is not your first time, then I'd love for you to let me know that you enjoy the show by subscribing. And at the end of this show, all you first timers, if you enjoyed the show, please do subscribe and then hit that bell icon right next to it so that you know every single time I go live. And remember, I go live every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. That's right. You know what our purpose is here on Talking with Dr. Donna. Our goal and our focus is to build generational health. We are focusing on our 4 pillars. We focus on our spiritual pillar, our mental and emotional pillar, our physical pillar, and our environmental pillars. And we focus on all 4 of those aspects of our health, then we can end this cycle of premature death that we see in the Black community. Now, if you're not a part of the Black community, I haven't forgotten about you, but when you think about the highest rates of disease and death, it is impacting the Black community the most. So that's who we focus on right here on Talking with Dr. Donna. So thank you again for being here. Speaking of generations and generational health, I am so excited about my guest tonight. He actually is my big brother. I have 2 older brothers, so I call one my big brother. And this gentleman that you're getting ready to meet is my big brother. So I want to welcome in Tony Tomato White from Tony's Family Farms. So welcome, Brother Tony.
Hey, sis, how are you?
I'm good. All right, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my brother here. He owns Tony's Family Farms. They are dedicated to delivering hyper-fresh, mouth-watering, delicious produce year-round, rain or shine. Can't find that too often. When a professional chef suggested that the farm could produce and bring to establishments in the area, he sees the opportunity. So he works with lots of chefs bringing fresh produce to restaurants all around the St. Louis area. He started out small, but he's seen major growth over the past few years. He now delivers thousands of pounds of fruit, vegetables, and herbs to dozens of professional kitchens in the St. Louis area. His produce is sourced not only from land, but many like-minded farmers in the Midwest. Now, you know, if you know me, that we were born in Tulare, California here, which is an agricultural area of California, Central California. He got his Bachelor's of Arts in Management at St. Mary's College right here in the Bay in Moraga. And we are just excited to have you. This is awesome.
Thanks, Liz. All right.
All right. So again, if you are on, please let us know if you have any questions. We will try to answer your questions live. So if you have a question for me or for Tony, go ahead and put it in the chat and we will get to your question. All right. You ready? All right. What made you get into farming? Of all things that you have done in your life, what led you to farming?
Well, you know, it's funny. Growing up in the San Joaquin Valley, farming has always been part of our core. from our grandfather, great grandfather, our grandfather in Tulare, California, Russian Scott, he made a living as an agricultural irrigation specialist because in California, there's always a challenge with water. And a lot of farmers are producing incredible produce in that area, peaches, plums, grapes, cotton, watermelon. But all of those items need water. And so, our grandfather was part of that. And then our father, he was involved with farm labor work also. And I remember many of evenings just begging, can I go ride with you, Dad, to go out and, change the water? So you learn how to work the siphon hose and all that stuff. So it's always been there. And in every place where I've lived at, I've tried to grow something. So either herbs or tried to plant fruit trees or have a garden. I mean, even in Tulare, I had a small little garden. Could never grow a carrot, but, we were able to produce, some pretty good things here. And just coincident, living here in the St. Louis market, I mean, it's just, it isn't a flyover city anymore for me, especially coming from California. I mean, I really love this area. It is rich with nutrients. The water table is so shallow, so your plants just they were never really starving. But, I used to spend a lot of time in the outdoors hunting, and one of the farms near where I lived at had a big corn maze. And so on November 1st, ironically, Halloween is over with, and they had all this corn. And one afternoon, when was November 1st, when I showed up to pick up the corn, I ran into an old Black farmer. His name was Mr. James Fortune. And it turned out that, his farming days had gone, but he still maintained a lease he grew hogs or raised hogs in that particular area. And he said, why don't you split this corn with me? And I looked over and I said, where do you live at? And he says, I live back over in those trees. And I said, oh, can I hunt? And that turned off to be a fantastic relationship that I developed with this man. I would, I dropped off the corn and then we would just chat on a Wednesday because I would attend networking meetings and there would be breakfasts that were extra left over. And I would just sit down and have a conversation with Mr. Fortune about things. And then that summer, he suggested that I should try farming. Now, unfortunately, I failed. Even though I lost 20 pounds in the field. I'm not a gym person, so I really didn't mind, but I didn't grow anything. And he would just laugh at me like, oh my God, boy, you don't know what you're doing. It's funny watching you. But what he shared with me is that, I'm not going to have a garden next year. Why don't you get with the other two farmers and you guys build a fence around these 5 acres? And I think you guys will have some success. And that is when things started to take off. Everything I put into the ground grew that year. I had to solicit families and friends to make jams and jelly, and I know you received it.
Yes.
Several of my aunts received baskets of these are things that we just grew.
Right.
And the person that I was involved with at that time got so tired of all the fresh fruit and vegetables. She said, "Why don't you just take the stuff across the street and sell it?" That's not a bad idea. And so that's when I met and I didn't realize it, but it was a very popular Italian restaurant from the Hill region of the St. Louis area that just opened a new restaurant right across the street from my house. And I'm talking like 50 yards away from where I lived at. And I walked in and I said, I think I can grow tomatoes. And these are his words. Steve Komarak said, I will take every tomato that you grow picked at the peak of perfection. And so, Lauren and Theron were up with me for the summer. And that evening in July, right when everything ripened, we showed up with 800 pounds of heirloom tomatoes. Now, they weren't the best looking tomatoes, but it was 800 pounds. But that evening, what was also astounding, Donna, is that there was another restaurant, Napoli 3, the owner's Andy Piestua. He happened to be dining at the restaurant next door. These two restaurant owners at 8:30 in the evening started to get into a bidding war over these tomatoes. And I said, I think we got something here.
Wow. Okay. I want to unpack a lot of some of the things that you said. Okay. First, I love that's you're doing great. First, I love the story of the farmer. Okay. And we know that there is, you're in Missouri, you're in St. Louis, right?
Right.
You didn't know a lot about farming, but you just tried your hand, right?
That's correct.
So that's one thing I want to let people know, that you may not make it the first time you try to do a garden. Now, I can kill a plant faster than anybody in America. Do not have the green thumb that should have been passed down from generations. I just forget to water.
Right.
But you failed the first time you tried, but when you tried again, you actually grew. So as we continue to talk tonight about growing your own food, just be encouraged that maybe the first time you grow, it may not work, but the second time, if you keep at it, you might be able to make your garden grow.
That's right.
That's the first thing. The second thing is hearing the story about the opportunity, right? To thinking out of the box, but that's what we whites do. I'm gonna have to put that plug in. We think out of the box, and to go across the street to sell your produce, and that's how you got into the business of selling fresh produce to chefs, because we all know when we go eat at a restaurant, we want fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, and these chefs recognize that, right?
That's right. That's right.
All right, so we know there's racism and discrimination in all of our systems in America. That is why it's called systemic racism, right? And so the agricultural industry is no different. That as you're a Black man in St. Louis, Missouri, you have a thriving, though, agricultural business. Why do you think that your business has been successful?
So why do I think my business has been successful in St. Louis? Donna, obviously I'm a very pigmented man, but I never have allowed that to be my hindrance. Our mother always put us front and forward. She always made sure that we were engaging and we learned how to be respectful and talk to people. And I think that is probably part of my success, because I'm not afraid to talk to anybody, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to do the same thing. They want to provide for their families. And when you're working with chefs, finding those chefs that are like-minded, who want to serve quality products, quality produce. And that's what I have always just tried to market myself differently. I mean, I'll be straight. You can buy tomatoes that are translucent less than what I charge for mine, but you're not going to have the quality that I have with mine. And in aligning myself with those like-minded people is what has been the success of what my business has been. The other key thing is listening. When I first met Steve Komarak, he gave me clear instructions as to what he was looking for. And it turned out that the restaurant that was bidding up against him was looking for the same thing. And just being able to engage and taking the time to talk to these busy people, but solve what their problems are, is what we have to focus on. And what I focus on that has made my business, I think, stand out above some of my competitors.
That's good. That's a good tip. I hope everybody heard that. Find a problem and then find the solution, right? All right, so let's get into talking about health and the food, because I know people out there are like waiting to hear how to grow their own foods. So how do you personally connect farming and food to health? What is that connection for you?
How do I connect farming to food and health? Well, if you're growing items yourself, you're going to have a complete different taste of something that you have. And, surprisingly enough, and I know you and I have this conversation, all the time with your backyard. I'm always giving you suggestion of things that you should grow.
Yeah.
And, it's just, if you ever had a fresh cucumber, that's picked off the vine versus something that's been transported, several hours away, you'll get addicted to it. And hey, by all means, as you're eating healthy, you're gonna feel good. I'm laughing at the photo that you have in back. Thank you for the editing of that, because my belly was looking pretty big on that. But that's a good story. With that gentleman there. He ran across what I was doing, and he has a juice bar. And, he focuses, the microgreen there is wheatgrass, and he asked me to grow some specifically for him. And I put it together, And when I brought it into him and I said, I've never had a wheatgrass, what is this? How do you use this? He trimmed it up. He said, I'm going to add a little pineapple juice, a little of this, a little of that, and it's going to be a smoothie for you. I think you're going to find it to be very delicious. And it was. It was incredible.
Yeah, so you're talking about, we're showing pictures of the winter wheat and the wheatgrass smoothie there. And so those things are called microgreens, right?
Right. That's correct.
What are microgreens?
So microgreens, the easiest description is that they're baby plants that have just sprouted the first 2 leaves. Okay? They're usually about 3 inches in height. And, when you walked into a lot of restaurants, with our mother, you would see parsley as the garnish that was on top of it. Well, today, chefs have kind of figured out that I really need to really enhance, this steak or this seafood, or that's out here, and so they're using microgreens. And microgreens, they either fall into the category of savory or sweet, but the key thing is that they're loaded with nutrients. I mean, more nutrients out of, a few microgreens than you would have by eating a whole head of broccoli. And so that's where the big trend is going with this. And surprisingly enough, I mean, these microgreens are so easy to grow. So easy to grow.
Yeah, you're right. So microgreens, for everyone out there, like Tony said, are just the first sprout. So it is, if you allowed them to grow, they'd grow into a full blown of the plant we normally have. I love it.
I had to bring you a prop, sis, okay?
So what are those? What are those?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So what are these? These are sunflowers. Okay. Yeah, so, and you can see that in another few days, they're going to pop and you'll see the 2 different leaves. But this item right here has such a nice nutty flavor. You can put it on top of your salads. You can add it into smoothies, and they're super easy to grow.
Yeah. And the other thing about microgreens is they're jam-packed with nutrients, like you said.
Right.
They almost have, depending on which microgreen you use, it has like 4 to 70 times the amount of vitamins and minerals. You're killing me. Vitamins and minerals than
Here, I'll bring it back up here.
regular plant. So what are those?
So these are radish. And
Okay.
if you look, you can't really see it there, but that some of the stems are pink. And so a lot of the chefs will put this on top of some of their beef when they're serving up, the beef Wellingtons or.
And so like that radish is a microgreen, right? So you can have the microgreen of the radish versus the actual plant, right? Of the
That's
radish,
correct.
that red thing that you may not like. But if you take the microgreens aspect of that radish, then you're getting jam-packed with nutrients and vitamins, right? And then the flavor is a little different than the flavor of the actual radish, right? Which to me doesn't really have a lot of flavor.
Right. So the radish itself has a really pepper flavor to it. And matter of fact, the photo that you're showing right there is one of Swiss chard, and there's Swiss chard microgreens. There's cabbage microgreens. There's mustard microgreens. There's collard green microgreens. I mean, basically, they're just baby plants.
Yeah.
And you put them in a tray, and I mean, this is a picture of the actual full plant itself. I just wanted to kind of show you just what some of the garden looked like, for a person who doesn't really have a big tractor to work it, but that's just, out, grinding it out. But, the microgreens are just loaded with so much information, with so much nutrients, and they really are easy to grow. It's super easy to grow.
All right, so there's lots of questions in the chat. So I'm going to get to how to grow your own food at home and what they can do. And then we're going to get into some of these questions, because some of these questions are talking about what kind of materials you should use. Should you grow it inside or in a greenhouse? So lots of questions, but we'll get to your questions. Don't worry.
Right.
Continue to put them there in the chat and we'll get to them. But something I wanted to say about the taste, because one of the plants that I didn't kill on my deck were some green bell peppers. And when I picked them and I used them to eat with, even that little mini small bell pepper tasted 1,000 times better than the bell pepper that I get in the store.
Right.
So you are right about the taste being so different. Okay, so let's
Donna,
talk
can I
about.
share with you? Can I share with you just a quick story about just the freshness piece? You know, and if you grew a bell pepper, and that's really a hard, patient plant that I mean, you have to have a lot of patience to grow that plant. So hats off to you, sis.
Hey.
But one of the things that I enjoyed during the summer is growing jalapenos. Now, you know, you start them early. It takes a long germination period for them to get up and get going. But I had somebody ask me to make them some stuffed jalapenos one night. Well, I went out to my garden and everything was gone because, you know, some of the friends that I farm with had came through and picked up some. And so I said, rats, okay, I'm going to make this stuffed jalapenos for her. So I went to the grocery store and I bought some jalapenos, got home, cut them, stuffed them, wrapped them with bacon, and then I served them. And after the first bite, she said, "These aren't your jalapenos." So once you get going on the taste of fresh fruit, food and vegetables, and you realize how easy it is to grow, you know, it's pretty hard to go back.
Yeah, I agree. You know, you're re-inspiring me to start my garden back, because one of my biggest complaints is going to the grocery store these days and buying vegetables and buying fruit and it having no taste.
Right.
And so you're really inspiring me to go do what I know it's in my blood, right? It's in my blood. I should be able to do it. Okay. Let's talk about some tips. What tips do you have on how to grow your own food?
Okay. So my first tip is there's a lot of people that like tomatoes, and everybody wants to try to grow the big beef steak tomatoes, the big heirloom tomatoes. I mean, these items here.
Your tomatoes are amazing. I'm not even going to try a tomato.
But you know, here's the thing. It's very difficult to grow a large tomato, and I always post, like, if you can grow a tomato, then you're pretty slick, right? Pretty good. But there's other varieties of tomatoes, especially if you're just getting started with a garden, if you're trying to grow, if you're limited on space. You know, the screen that you have behind you, the center photo is a picture of a black pot. You know, I mean, here's an example of one, and it's just your simple garden pot. You can pick it up for a few dollars at any hardware store or Sam's Club, Costco, or whatever. But start with cherry tomatoes, and I say that because you know, and somebody had put a question up about squirrels, you know, eating it. You know, Mr. Fortune always told me, he said, always grow more than what you think you need, because the deer is going to get their share, the raccoon, the possum, all Mother Nature is going to come in and take there. And if at the end of the day, they may leave you some, okay? So, starting with cherry tomatoes, you know, they just are so robust when they produce, and they don't require a lot of space. And if you want to add it up, try a few different flavors, you know, put in a yellow one, a red one, try to find a black one. And you know what? I sell as many cherry tomatoes through the course of a week as I do some large tomatoes. And you know, you're talking about enhancing the flavor, the characteristics of your food. You'll be very successul with that, and you'll feel like you really have accomplished something by going with the cherry tomatoes. Okay.
All right. Let's talk about some of these herbs that you have, like growing these herbs that we're seeing, which is thyme and oregano, I believe. And then growing like basil. Like, so how do you grow herbs? Where do you start?
You know, it's okay. So if you can go back to the other screen that showed the big pot, I just have flower plots on my deck, and you know, I have acres and acres and people that I could easily grow. And this is what I always try to share with my daughters. If you look at the one image, you can tell that there's lettuce that's there. You know, that is actually just a red leaf lettuce, but there's 10 heads that are in that container. And so when you really look at it, you're like, whoa, wait a minute here. You put a lot in that area. Well, you know, a lot of vegetables really don't need a lot of space. And as long as the leaves are tall enough that you can make a salad or chop it, continue to use it, and it will thrive until it starts getting hot. And so you can plant your lettuce at the beginning of the spring, and then after summer is over with, you can replant lettuce again going into the fall, because it doesn't take long for that plant to survive. You'll have a lot of success growing lettuce. You go to any hardware store and you buy a little 6-pack. Get 2 of them, put them in a little container. These are 3 different pots that I have had an enormous amount of success with. Basil. You know how expensive it is to buy herbs
Yes,
at the grocery
yes,
store today?
yes.
But do you really, I mean, and one of the things I just try to emphasize with everybody, sage, thyme, lemon thyme, right? These are different things that you can use for seasoning that when you need to purchase it, it's $2, $3, $4 for it, but they're super easy to grow. They don't require a lot of space. And you can just put them at the edge of your flower beds, and there you go. But it's very simple. And what I've been sharing with my daughters, Amber, my daughter up in Oregon, she really turned out the garden. And then there's Ashley that's out there. So we just got to get Lauren back on the page here. But it's very, you don't really need a whole lot of space to start a garden, to have a lot of success. Those are little bitty, 2-inch herb pots. You can buy one of those at any of your hardware store. And the nice thing about the herb that you're showing there on the left, or even the oregano, I mean, you plant it in this place in your garden, it's going to come back year after year after year. And guess what you've done? You just saved yourself a lot of money. Right. And there's nothing, I mean, just going out and trimming that, or, trimming that thyme and coming back in and adding it to, some wild mushrooms or get regular store-bought mushrooms. It's just amazing to have, you will taste the difference of flavor. And, you're getting stuff that's cut that hasn't lost many of its nutrients.
Yeah, and you're right, like the ease of it. But do you do anything special? So let's say you go to Home Depot or any other hardware store, not to plug Home Depot, any other hardware store, and you grab some of these seeds and you plant it. Do you put additional soil in, or do you just plant it in the soil in which you purchase these little pots in?
Okay, so when I go to the hardware store, or if I'm trying to, create a small pot, like I use a mixture of just regular ground dirt. That's from my yard, or in my case, I'll go out to the farm and I'll fill up half that bucket with dirt, and then I'll buy a couple of bags of dirt. Or you can just go to any of these hardware stores, Lowe's or Home Depot. They all sell a bag of dirt for $1.99, and there it is. You throw it in the container. I mean, I'm telling you, basil is so expensive, but it's so easy to grow. Yeah. And so what I try to do is I'll have several of these pots around my house, and then I'll start one pot with basil, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, I'll just throw the seeds in the pot, cover it up, keep it watered, and go about my business. And all of a sudden, here comes the basil. And there is nothing like fresh pesto made with that basil. I mean, you walk by, I mean, it's incredible. And it is so easy to grow.
Yes, I agree. And now you're giving Missouri prices, I want you to know. Those are not California prices. Basil in the store in California is like $6. It's not $2.
You know what? You're right. 2 years ago when I was out there for Thanksgiving, I was like, oh, maybe I should pack some of this basil with me here. But
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's take some questions. You ready?
Okay.
All right, let's see. What's the best way to trim a cherry tomato vine? Do you have a recommendation how you trim the vine?
What's the best way to trim a cherry tomato vine? Well, as the plant comes up, you have the main stalk, and then you'll start having shoots that will come off to the side. There's this one plant that kind of comes up through the center of that, and it's called a sucker. You want to remove the sucker and let your plant continue to flourish. We have plants at this time of the year that are grown in the glass house that will reach almost 10 feet tall. But the first 3 or 4 feet will just be just a vine. And I wish I would have, included a picture of that. But, a lot of people are really reluctant when they're growing their tomatoes to, well, I just want to let the bush become the bush, right? And the other issue you see a lot of is that they always overwater it. So you only need a gallon of water once a week for your plants. I mean, let those roots go out and try to dig and find that moisture in the soil, okay? But as for trimming, don't be afraid to trim it. Or the actual term is called suckering the plant.
Okay. Let's see. Should you grow your plants outside or in a greenhouse?
Should you grow your plants outside or in a greenhouse? Well, it depends on where you live at. Here in Missouri, and it's funny, we have this thing, a term called a spring hair. And in April, we may have a 70-degree day, and all of a sudden everybody's out. They've got their clothes on. The leaves are starting to pop, and we want to go out and plant our garden. Well, usually in April, it also snows toward the end of it. So everything, all that work you've done in the beginning has just been fruitless because you needed to wait to May. And so in California, you can put things out in the garden, put them outside and enjoy that sun. Here, we don't really have that luxury. So I start a lot of our plants in the greenhouse, and I don't really start putting things out in the ground until May. And that, usually some of the risks that I have is the plant going to be too tall? I mean, I really try to wait. I want that plant to be about at least 6 inches where I can set it in the ground for it to happen. And if I can't, if we got a storm, or if the soil's too wet, then we have to wait. But I mean, California, it's the ideal conditions to grow are all around you.
Right. All right. Now, what do you think about when you purchase your seeds? Do you buy just regular seeds, or do you buy organic? Or do you think it matters? What is that?
This is Johnny Select Seeds. Okay. I love these guys. Okay.
Is that just regular seeds?
These are just regular. This is a bag of microgreen seeds that I have. Okay. This is just a 5-pound sack of it, and that's what I use. And Ace Hardware sells a little bitty cute little packages of seeds. Go online. I provided you with a few different resources. I don't know if we're going to post that slide, but Johnny Select Seeds is probably the best thing to do. You want to deal with a commercial grower. I do buy organic seeds. Okay. And here's something that you just got to keep in mind. Not every seed is going to produce. I mean, I just read an article just earlier this week from a friend that we talked about pumpkins, and an average pumpkin farmer will plant 3,000 plants, but yet you may only get 1,000 pumpkins. Okay. And so when I told you earlier, be prepared for loss, because anything can happen. Beetles love pumpkins. Deer like pumpkins. Okay, raccoons, rabbits. It's insane. So you just got to be prepared that there's going to be some crop loss. And at the end of the day, hopefully you'll have something to take to market or enjoy with your family. Okay?
Right. Okay, let's see. Love them. Somebody has their own land. They want to start a nursery. Wow. Okay, Catherine, I see you, Catherine. Any suggestions? Okay, wait. What does it mean when your green onions develop a flower bulb on the top?
That's the end of that plant. Okay.
You hear that, Carmen? It's done.
But you can take that flower and you can use it as garnish. Okay. Okay, so that's part of it. So there's a part of the season where I will sell the onion flower, the onion blossom, as a micro type green. Okay.
Okay.
But nice. Donna, there was a question from somebody that said they have some land. Okay.
Yes.
I don't know if they're still on, but I would suggest that it's called a Zimmerman Greenhouse. Okay. And that is a high tunnel. You can decide on what size you want. It could be 20 yards across or maybe 50 yards long. But the nice thing about the Zimmerman Greenhouse is that it's metal, there's some wood, and it has the ability to raise the sides up on it. It's clear plastic across the top. They'll sell you the whole kit. Just Google Zimmerman Greenhouses, and that will be one of the best investments that you've made. If you go online, because we kind of talked about that earlier about the government and so forth. There are some government programs that will even contribute some money to you if you are growing that product and you have the focus to take it commercially to the marketplace. Over a 3-year period, they will help offset some of the costs of what you have there. So that was a very good question from
Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have a question. Just like, when you have your greens, like let's say you have your thyme and you have your basil, how do you pick it to keep the plant from not dying? Like, do you just pick the leaf off, or do you take the whole stalk? How do you pick your greens so that you can continue to replenish your plants?
Yes, that's a very good question here. So how do I pick that? Well, I think the key thing is that I don't fall in love with any of the plants. And so if I'm growing basil, and I'm growing it in a pot, and remember, I'm planting that basil every 2 or 3 weeks through the course of the summer. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a problem with that plant not coming back. I'll trim it and just move on. Because, what happens, I mean, the life cycle on a lot of these plants really isn't that long, because before you realize it, your plants will start flowering. And when they start flowering, then that's the signal that they're gone. And then the game is over. Okay. So it's just as easy to buy a big bag of seed and just, take your time and paste it all the way across. So, yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you. All right. So our final question is, well, I have a couple more questions I see. Are eggshells and coffee grounds good to add to soil?
Or eggshells and coffee grounds good to actually add to soil. So I hear the rumor about the eggshells are good to prevent worms or snails that are moving around in your garden because it kind of works as a deterrent with them. I do take our farm eggs, crush them up, and I'll throw them in my pot. But what you're trying to do is make some compost. And in order for compost to be done correctly, you need to kind of Google it, because you need that soil to bake and get hot, right? I mean, I add coffee grounds to my pots, the planter box I just showed you, all year long. But I also add fresh dirt in onto it so that the nutrients are working, okay?
All right. All right. So here we go. Last question we're going to give to part of our production team. How far should I plant my peach tree from the house? Is there any distance that you need when you're planting fruit trees that they need to kind of grow and flourish?
I have peach, I have plums in my yard. I just, I try to find so those trees get sunlight. That's the key thing that you want to make sure, okay? And then, traffic, okay? And then the key thing, peaches are hard because you really need to trim them correctly. Hey, Donna, can I ask her one other question for Christina really quick here?
Go ahead.
Okay. Do you think you can grow successfully in northern Louisiana with the Zimmerman Greenhouse? Absolutely. Okay, I'm sorry. You got me going, okay? I'm sorry.
Yes, I should have you as my co-host every week. Okay, great. All right. Anything else you want people to know about growing their own food or about farming or anything else that you want people to know?
Try again, okay? Find something that you like to eat and just throw it in the ground.
That's it?
That's it, okay?
Okay, well, thank you, Tony, for being here. Tony,
right,
Family
sis.
Farms in St. Louis, Missouri. Thank you so much. You can look him up online. I wish that you could do interstate transport because, I miss my tomatoes. I miss the cherry tomatoes. Everything that you grow is always so delicious. But I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving because I know you're bringing a suitcase to California.
It's a suitcase of produce.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Tony. We're going to go through some other things. Okay. Love you too. All right. Our food of the month, y'all. Oh my gosh, wasn't that great? Yeah, I have a great big brother, don't I? All right. So as we close our show, remember, we talk about our food of the month. And last month we did kale, which if you do a microgreen of kale, it is actually the biggest superfood of the microgreens, kale. Baby kale, microgreen kale. So that was our food of the month last month. And our food of the month this month, in honor of our Native American Native American Heritage Month, we are going to have our food of the month be squash. Woo! So these are pictures of pumpkins, which I learned something new is actually in the squash family. And then we have butternut squash and spaghetti squash. Annette, here we go. We talked about spaghetti squash today on how to make squash. So the reason why we are celebrating it as a part of Native American Heritage Month is because it's a part of the Great Eight or the Magic Eight that were indigenous to the Americas and did not exist in any other part of the world. So it was our gift to us from the Native Americans. It includes corn, beans, chili, tomato, Tony, potato, vanilla, and cacao. Cocoa, how do you say it? Cacao. But we're doing the squash, part of our Magic 8, our squash this month. It's high in vitamins, especially vitamin A. And vitamin A is great for your eyes. It's great for your immune system. So as we are still battling COVID, we want our bodies to be as healthy as possible, our immune system to be as healthy as possible. Well, squash will help do that. High in fiber. So you know Dr. Peterson will be happy that you're eating some squash because you're taking care of your gut. So it's squash for the month, and high in vitamin C, which again helps with our immune system. So as we're going into the fall and we have Thanksgiving right around the corner, I want you to say a thank you to the Native Americans for gifting us with squash, our food of the month. As always, take some pictures of what you're cooking and how you're cooking squash. Post it on our page. Let us know what you're doing and how you are cooking it. All right? All right. So finally, we're going to do some quick things that you need to know, some things that happened this week that you really need to make sure that you are understanding and pay attention to. So this is our Need to Know segment, our NTK segment. Number 1, kids' vaccines became available. They are now in emergency use. Our little babies, ages 5 to 11-year-olds, can now start getting vaccinated. It's Pfizer only, so we don't have the other vaccines, so it's just Pfizer. And with about 2,000 kids were in a part of the study. It was shown to be about 91% effective against, again, severe disease and against hospitalizations and death. You can now get this vaccine for your kids in pharmacies. Check your child's pediatric practice or pediatrician to see if they are offering it. Some of our clinics may not get it for the next week or two, but it is available in some of our pharmacies right now. My son, who's 10, when I told him that it received emergency use, he was like, Mom, when are you making my appointment? I'm ready. I want to be vaccinated. So make sure you have a conversation with your kids and think about it in terms of protecting them as they go to school. As you may know, we talked about this last week in California, starting in January when the kids come back from Christmas break, it's going to be mandated that if they can get a vaccine, they're going to get a vaccine. That's ages 12 and up, the fully approved, not this emergency use 5 to 11, but the 12 and above. If your kids are not vaccinated, they will not be able to go to school. All right, second need to know. Second one is that there is ACEs screening. Now, ACEs is Adverse Childhood Experiences. This is things that happened to you as a child that may have impacted you. It gives you a high risk for toxic stress syndrome, which is the syndrome which basically your brain, because of the high level of stress that is experienced as a child, starts to make connections that it wouldn't normally make. That leads to behavioral changes, that leads to being hyper alert, that leads to being angered easily. We can recognize a lot of that in the Black community, right? So we know California has put a lot of effort in making sure that our kids are being screened for ACEs so that we can determine if they're at high risk for toxic stress. The research has showed that if you have high ACEs scores, it also sets you up when you're an adult for a risk of chronic disease, like heart disease, like having strokes. All of this is related to things that may have happened in your childhood. It's pretty amazing how everything is connected, right? And you think that what happened to you as a child doesn't impact you? Well, it's not true. So we need to pay attention to what experiences our children are having in this generation. And for those of us who are already adults, thinking through what might have happened to us as children, getting the assistance in terms of therapy that we may have needed, and then taking care of our bodies, like we talked to today with Tony about growing your own food, eating healthy, and how we're trying to give you a food of the month to try to make sure that you keep yourself healthy. Governor Newsom signed a bill into law SB or Senate Bill 428 is starting January 2022 that says that insurance plans have to pay for your pediatric office and practice to screen for ACEs. And that may not seem like a big deal to you, but in the healthcare field, we usually don't pay attention and pay for services that are not clinical, right? That we're not treating you for something. We're not giving you a procedure. Our insurance plans very rarely paid for that. But that's going to change in January, which means there should be a lot more conversations about things like ACEs and stress and, what we call the social determinants of health, right? Part of that health pie, clinical, right, is only a little part of that. But all of these other things, do you have a home? Are you stressed? Are you, have all of these other issues really do impact your health as well. We're going to have a whole topic on ACEs, a whole show. So more to come, but just wanted to give you that thing to know. And finally, our third thing to know is about how do you check if there's an outbreak? And this came about because there's been some salmonella outbreaks recently. There has been an outbreak of a respiratory disease from people who purchased, I believe it was Better Homes and Garden aerosol spray in their house. And people were noticing that they started developing sort of cough and feeling bad, and come to find out there was an actual bacteria in the aerosol that when they sprayed into that house in their houses, it made them sick. So if you start to feel sick and it doesn't make sense, you can always go to this website right here, cdc.gov, and it will show you what are the current outbreaks. It will talk to you about some of how it presents and let you know what you can do about it. So those are your top 3 need to know for this week. All right. Now we got to talk about COVID. Why? Because we're in the middle of a pandemic and it hasn't gone away. We have over 750,000 people who have died from this disease. So let's share what's happening in our county. The good news is that our cases are starting to decline. The bad news is that we're getting ready to go into winter and we're anticipating another surge. The people who we know that are hardest hit are our elderly, right? And we're looking at our cases, highest case numbers still remain in that 18 to 30-year-old group. And I know you guys are out there listening and you think that you're invincible, but you're not. COVID is actually infecting all ages, all the way down to our newborns, up to our elderly in our population. And you may think, well, since our cases are declining, why do I need to get a vaccine? Because it's still killing on average about 1,000 people a day. And you don't want to be in one of that number. So that's their age. If we look at our race, we've been talking about this, right? Hardest hit by this pandemic have been our Black and brown, right? Highest case rates, highest hospitalizations. Look at that blue bar for African Americans by the number of people that have died versus other races. It's out there, okay? So that's why we talk about it here on this show, Talking with Dr. Donna, because I want you to understand that you are at high risk out there. If you are Black, you are at the highest risk of hospitalization and death from this disease. As we look at our vaccines, right? Highest cases, highest rates, but our vaccinations remain the lowest in the Black and brown communities. So we have some work to do still. If you have already been vaccinated and it's been more than 6 months, you really need to consider getting a booster shot. Booster shots are available now in all 3 vaccines. So if you got a Pfizer, you can get a Pfizer booster. If you got Moderna, you can get a Moderna booster. If you got J&J, get a Moderna booster. Did you hear me? Okay, don't get a J&J booster. Get a Moderna booster. So Moderna has been showing in all of the studies to have the highest efficacy against our Delta variant, which is the common variant that we're dealing with right now in the pandemic. All right, so lots of information, but that's what we do here on Talking with Dr. Donna. Remember, everybody, thank you for watching out there. Remember our food of the month. Remember to share your recipes on my Twitter, which is TW Dr. Donna for Talking with Dr. Donna. And let me know what you're making out there with this lovely squash, which is our food of the month. You can also follow me on Instagram at MyDrDonna or Facebook, Talking with Dr. Donna. So let us know what you're doing. Thank you again for watching. Remember, you have an appointment with your doctor every Thursday at 6:30. So keep your appointments. I thank you for keeping your appointment tonight. I look forward to seeing you next week. Remember, if you have not already subscribed to my show and you found any bit of what we talked about tonight interesting or helpful, I really appreciate it if you go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Hit that bell icon. Let you know whenever I go live, because we're here for you. Also, if there's a topic or a question that you want to have more information on, you can leave that on my page too. We'll take that in consideration because we want to make sure we're giving you information that you want. All right. Thank you so much for joining another episode of Talking with Dr. Donna. Thank you, Tony White and Tony Family Farms, for being with us today. Thank you for keeping your appointment. See you next week. If you have a question for Dr. Donna, please do leave it on my page and I will be happy to answer the question for you.